On today's show, the Locked On Cavs whip around is back. We're going to preview games against the Portland Trail Blazers, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Detroit Pistons this week. Let's dive in on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. The whip around is back. The Cavs have 4 games this week as they take on the Portland Trail Blazers on Tuesday. That is tomorrow. If you're watching or listening to this on Monday, San Antonio Spurs, the last team that they have not seen yet this year, come to Cleveland on Thursday. They have a back-to-back going to Detroit on Friday, and then the the LA Clippers come to Cleveland for their second and final meeting of the season on Sunday. I talked with Jeff Garcia over at Locked On Spurs about what's going on with San Antonio. Obviously, Victor Wembanyama not been in the lineup lately. De'Aaron Fox also not in the lineup lately, but Spurs have been a really good offense. Talked with Mike Richman over at Locked On Blazers. Portland is playing Boston as I record this right now, but going into that game on Sunday, they've won 4 games in a row. They've been making a push up the Western Conference standings. Of course, when the Cavs and Blazers saw each other 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago at this point, I don't know, I'm losing track of time, Portland took the Cavs to overtime. I was very impressed with how they played. Deni Avdija looked really good in that game. He had a 30-point triple-double. We'll see what things look like as the Cavs wrap up their 5-game West Coast road trip on Tuesday night and then Friday night. For the 4th and final time this regular season, the Cavs take on the Detroit Pistons and old friend JB Bickerstaff. And who else to bring in other than our friend Kuka Hill, who does a great job over at Locked On Pistons. So stay tight right there because we're going to talk through what this week is possibly going to look like for the Cavs. But I do need to let you know about the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter. It is the one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. That is LockedOnDaily.com. Now, let's talk about the week ahead. The West Coast trip continues for the Cleveland Cavaliers as they wrap up their 5-game trip out west in Portland with the second and final meeting of the season against the Trail Blazers. We bring in Michael Richman of Locked On Blazers to talk about all things Portland and the Blazers. And we're talking right now before Portland takes on Boston on Sunday, so we don't know what happens in that game. But they've been playing good basketball lately. They've won 4 in a row. The last time that the Cavs saw the Blazers in Cleveland, it was a game in overtime. I thought Portland played really well in it. What have you seen in the second half of this season? Because they got off to a rough start, but they've been really good since, I don't know if you want to say January 1st or what the date that you pinpoint is as they start to turn things around. But what have you seen as – yeah, go ahead. Take it away.
I'll give you a date, Danny. It was January 19th. So that's game 42 of the season. They started 31-28. They were bottom 6 in offense, bottom 6 in defense. They're a bad basketball team, right? Like, it is what it is. Since then, they are, depending on how you want to slice it, one of the 5 best defensive teams in the league. They're slightly below average offense during that stretch, but they're propped up by being a good defensive team. That really starts with Toumani Camara. Deni Avdija has been maybe all-star level good over the last 6 weeks. And they have just enough shooting on any random night to be okay on offense. But because of that baseline of good defense, they've been pretty darn good. They don't lose to bad teams. They haven't lost to a team below 500 since that date in January. They haven't been as good against winning teams, but they've played teams like Cleveland tough. So, they're so much better than they were. And boy, was one niche podcaster wrong about how good this team was going to be.
You brought up Toumani Camara because he's a guy that I wanted to ask about, because in watching the amount of Blazers that I do, I'm not going to sit here and act like I watch Portland as much as I've watched the Cavs, but I've seen enough of them to know that he's legit. Like, he's really, really good, especially on the defensive end of the floor. And I believe he was Defensive Player of the Month out west, or Rookie of the Month, or he won some sort of award, and he's very deserving of it. But did the Blazers expect him to be what he is already?
You know, last year he was a good defensive rookie. And he was even probably just a good defensive player for a rookie. He was 24 when he got drafted, so he was a little bit older. But like this year, I think they were like, yeah, Toumani is a good defensive player. And now we've got to the end of the season, and it's like Toumani Camara is probably going to maybe make an all-defense team. Like, he might be one of the best 10 defenders in the league. He's certainly one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, even if he doesn't get hardware at the end of the year. I think it's pretty clear that he's one of the best defensive players in the league, because there's a lot of big guys. Cleveland might just have too many big guys getting awards for that. But I think they thought he was going to be good, but I don't think they thought he was going to be like starts on 27 teams in the league and plays for all 30 and would be a playoff caliber player in year two like this. I think I don't know if he's ahead of schedule. I think he's just like, he's taken strides that maybe bigger strides than maybe you would have thought.
So you mentioned Deni Avdija as well, and he had, I believe, a 30-point triple-double when the Blazers were in Cleveland earlier in the month of March. And you mentioned him as being one of the reasons why, like, this team's around playing at all-star level. Like, what has stood out to you about his game during this stretch since January 19th? Yeah,
well, since the All-Star break, Deni's shooting 50% from three, so that helps. You make half your threes. That helps. He's probably not that, right? He's probably not the best shooter in the history of the NBA. Although
I'm going to take the under there.
Yeah, although it would be really useful for Portland if they had discovered that. But he's relentless in transition, a downhill attacker. He is extremely right-handed, but it doesn't matter. Everyone knows he's going right. Good luck. Like, he's just so physical. He's really good with his offhand. You will see him, if you watch him closely, use that little stiff arm move. He's going to stop, and he's going to use that offhand to get space. He is really physical on offense. They've given him the ball a lot more. He's got the ball in his hands more often than he has, certainly more often than he had in Washington, but even more often than he had at the beginning of the year. And he's been able to be maybe not like a high-level offensive hub, but at least a very solid part of an average NBA offense. And he's versatile enough on both ends that he's been really, really useful. And you couple that with a really hot shooting streak, and you look great. Like, the triple-double isn't that surprising. The 30 points is. Like, I think Deni could be very, very easily a 15-8-8 type of guy because he's that talented. It's just the scoring has taken to another level. Like, he had they're about to play the Celtics, so we'll see what happens. But, you know, in their last game, he had 36, 36, 5 and 5. Like, he's good. Dude can hoop.
He's good. Dude can hoop. I think that's a fair way to put it. And then what does year two of Scoot Henderson look like in Portland?
You know, the very, very beginning of the year was kind of concerning. I was like, okay, maybe that's, you know, maybe he's Tyus Jones, right? Like, maybe this is a career backup, like, not a bad basketball player, but he doesn't have enough high level skills to be what he can be. But I would say over the last, probably since Christmas, roughly, Scoot Henderson has shown just much better control of his speed, changing speeds, strength getting to the rim. He's dramatically improved as a shooter, which has allowed him. I don't think teams care about him shooting yet, but it's getting to the point where they have to care a little bit. And now when they go under screens, he can be like, great. That's great. That's what I want. I can take a non-step back, like walk into a three. And even in that game against Cleveland did it a couple times, right? Everybody goes under on Scoot because they're like, yeah, that's obviously keep him out of the paint, make him shoot 22-footers. And he's been a lot better at that lately. And that changes the calculation a little bit for him. He's not on a star track by any means. I wouldn't say that, but he is so much closer to being a high-level NBA player. And I should say a highly impactful NBA player than he's ever been. He's got a little bit of the Darius Garland, like what was like from like, to good, although Garland had probably took bigger steps in year two than Scoot has.
As we record this, and we don't know what happens Sunday between the Blazers and the Celtics, but Portland is 2 games behind Phoenix for 10th in the Western Conference. Do the Blazers want to make the play-in?
Boy, do they, Danny. Boy, do they. I think it's worth a conversation on my particular podcast, whether there's value in that. But the players want to. Sure as hell, the coach in a lame duck season wants to. The front office, which has made some pretty shameless fake injury stuff up over the last 3 seasons, hasn't done that this year. We haven't seen the egregious tanking stuff. They're playing their dudes and playing to win. They want this. They want to finish 10th in the West, which if you do it once is cool as hell. And if you do it several times is a nightmare. So I think what they're hoping is this is the launching point and not the end point of a team that many thought would be one of the 5 worst teams in the NBA this year.
Do you think that it makes sense for them to try and finish 10th? I know you just brought up that, maybe it doesn't make the most sense. Explain that side of it.
Now, as we record this in the middle of March, I think it makes sense. In January, when they won 10 of 11 and kind of launched this streak and were like handling some bad teams and like playing Jeremy Grant 38 minutes against the Charlotte Hornets in Charlotte in a game they won by 5. That is, I would say there was some sort of like short-term alignment, long-term alignment controversy. Like, what are they actually going for? But now that they've been this good for this, like this effective for this long, there's something like 18-12 in their last 30 games. Like, they're decent, right? It wouldn't make sense to pull the plug now because you can't even get as low. You can't even catch the teams that are truly going for it. The time to make that decision was basically when their season started to be effective. That was the time to pull the plug. And now that they haven't, I think it's totally reasonable, totally fine. And the point of any individual basketball game is to win it. So I'm not going to be too critical of teams that are trying to win. Yeah, I mean, they're probably a team that still needs high-level players and more quality draft picks to get where they want to go. But if they're this good right now, it does change the calculation of what you think they can be. Although the path from good to whatever's next remains a little bit mystifying.
We'll see what that path looks like in the future, and we will see what the Blazers look like against the Cavs on Tuesday night. Mike, thanks so much. If you want to learn more about the Blazers, check out his podcast, Locked On Blazers. Very much appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. If you know who Locked On Cavs, you know the drill. Come look for me.
Today's show brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it can be easy to lose track of all that cash. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, because they'll be your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center, and you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending right in one place. You can stop just managing your money and you can start building your wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan those long-term goals. And now managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDONNBA, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. The Cleveland Cavaliers will finally return from their 5-game road trip, and when they get back to Cleveland, the team waiting for them will be the San Antonio Spurs, the first of 2 matchups between the Cavs and Spurs this season. The Spurs are, at this point, I believe, the only team in the NBA the Cavs have not yet played. So to learn a little bit more about them, we bring in our friend Jeff Garcia from Locked On Spurs. And Jeff, this season has been a lot about Victor Wembanyama. Obviously, He hasn't played in a little while because of a blood clot injury that has had him ruled out for the season since just after the All-Star break. But what did you see from him before he went down? I know everybody has obviously very high expectations of him moving forward, but what did you see this year and what you did see from him?
Well, I started to see him do exactly what he was projected to do since entering the draft, being that dominant force on both ends of the court. Look, let's just put it this way. He was going to win the DPOY, Defensive Player of the Year, had he not gotten shut down. It was clear. I mean, Vegas, I think, one point had him at a plus 2,500. I mean, it was that ridiculous. So, it was projected he was going to win the DPOY, make an All-Star, which he did, and they continue to lead the Spurs team hopefully into a play-in berth. And they were on track to do that. And, of course, you know, the wheels came off. You had the incident with Popovich. That kind of jolted the team. You had Wemby getting shut down for the season because of the blood clot. And then you get De'Aaron Fox in a big trade, yay Spurs, and he goes out to repair a finger injury. So, yeah, you know, it was a season that started off with a little bit of high hopes. Like, hey, you know, we're going to get into the play-in. This is going to be good. Good experience for these young guys. And then, yeah, you know, we have to wait another season. It's been rough in San Antonio. It really has. A lot of Spurs fans are already checked out of the season. Well, we'll see this black and silver team next season. I mean, it's to that point now. I mean, tickets are on sale for $5 now. That's how crazy it's gotten in San Antonio. So, but other than that, you know, silver linings in the season. You know, the biggest one is Steph Castle. I know you're going to ask me about that, but yeah, he's been a revelation this season. You know, for a draft that was considered watered down, I wonder if you had to do it all over again. Does he go number 1? Does he go number 2 at the rate he's playing? But just kind of like the piece that the Spurs team needed to add to the rebuild. So you got your centerpiece, Wemby. Yay, we know that. You swing for the fences. You get a deal with Sacramento done. You bring in D Fox, exactly what the Spurs needed, an offensive weapon, secondary one for the Spurs. And then, lo and behold, you get a combo guard, Castle, who could do it all on both ends of the court, defense and offense. The Spurs rebuild is sitting pretty right now.
So how do you view it? And you brought up, and I do want to get to the Stephon Castle stuff. I want to get to the De'Aaron Fox stuff. But he and Wemby played, I believe you said it was 5 games before Wemby was ruled out for the season. Yeah. So there's obviously a really small sample size there. But how do you view his fit alongside Wemby? And then also, which, you know, he got more time with Castle, but how do you view that fit as well between the two guards?
You talking about Wemby and Fox and Wemby and Castle?
Fox and Castle and Fox and Wemby, yes. Okay,
we'll start off with Fox and Wemby. Yeah, you know, unfortunately, it was just 5 games. You look at the 2-man lineup, that Wemby-Fox combo was a minus 1.2. But you look at other stats within that very small sample size. Again, 5 games, everybody, so that's all they got together. You can project it out. You're talking about at least 20 points per game per player. So there's about 40-ish points right there. Defensively, look at it. Remember, they call him Swipe with the Fox for a reason. You know, he was getting it done with the steals. He was getting the scoring up. It took him a while to get going, even without Wemby, you know, when he was still, you know, playing when Wemby was shut down. He started getting his groove in the last 5 games before he got shut down. I think that was just a lot of playing on the road, a lot. He didn't have his first home game in San Antonio until like a month after the deal was made. So, and then getting adjusted to the system, getting adjusted to playing with Castle and playing for a little bit of playing with Wemby. But you can see it there. He's exactly the complementary piece this Spurs team needed to bring alongside Wemby. An all-star guard, can score, carry the burden on the offensive end. And we saw it plenty of times pre-Fox deal where Wemby was just like, what more can I do? You know, I need help. You know, he didn't get that much from Devin Vassell or Castle. He got some from the rookie Steph Castle, but it wasn't enough. So you bring him in. So that combo is looking good moving forward. Now, Fox Castle, that is the backcourt of the future right there. You know, Chris Paul, he's really showing his age, but, if he decides to stick on or not, there's no doubt about it. He's going to be the starting guard alongside with D Fox. Now, Castle, good thing about him, he can play a lot of multiple positions, not just the 1, not just the 2. He can play a little bit of the 3 as well. Look at the last game he played versus the 76ers. 20 points, great. Yay, Castle. But 14 assists. So he's starting to become more of a facilitator. And I think that's going to bode well for him moving forward and also give the Spurs another threat on the perimeter defense along with Fox. So you got Swipe at the Fox getting those steals. And then you got Steph Castle just locking people down. This is a guy that said he wants to take on Luka Doncic, that he wants to take on the big guy up there in the front perimeter of the opposing team. So, the sky's the limit for this guy. We're already there in San Antonio saying the next big 3 for San Antonio could be here already. Wemby, Fox, and Castle.
Well, I certainly think that'd be a great way for them to get through the rebuild. Obviously, 2 of those guys are not playing right now. And as we record this is before the Spurs take on the Toronto Raptors over the weekend. So they, at this point, as we talk, have 13 games left in the season. We're at to you? What are those final 13 games worth to the Spurs?
I'm glad you brought that up because the playoffs ain't going to happen. The play-in, okay, I get it. Mathematically, they're still in it, but likely not going to happen because they got some heavy hitters on the roster, on the schedule. They got your Cavs, not just once but twice, and that's going to be a tough out for them. They still got to play the Warriors. They got some heavy hitters on the schedule left. So I don't think this team will make the play-in. But if there's anything to keep an eye on, is the obvious, is just how much further along can Castle get better in these last 13-ish games the Spurs have. So that's something to look out for too. Other things to look out for too is guys that are pretty much auditioning to stay on the roster, whether that be free agency or via trade, because the Spurs have a war chest of draft picks. They got a lot of money to spend, and they got players that are good. They're not all-stars, but they're really good, solid players. Your Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohans, that could be flipped if needed to bring in a star power player to San Antonio. And one guy that's standing out right now to close out the season is Devin Vassell. Here's a guy that's been kind of the whipping boy for Spurs fans a lot. Who is this guy? He was supposed to be the heir apparent to the number 2 for Wemby. It didn't happen. They had to bring in Fox. Okay, so what are you going to do now, Vassell? Oh, you're Mr. Inconsistent. One day you're a 30-point scorer, 20 points, and then for 3-day games straight, you're 10, 6 points, 0 points. He's starting to get a little bit more consistent to end the season. You're seeing him score in double figures in the streak now, not 1 or 2 days off. So that's good to see from him. Also, too, Keldon Johnson, he's not getting a lot of love to end the season. Off the bench, I forgot the sample size is. I think it was about the last 6-7 games, close to 20 points per game for the Spurs off that bench. A lot of people saying San Antonio, hey, it's the 3-man guys they got right now, Fox, Castle, Wemby. I've personally been saying out there that don't leave out Keldon Johnson because, sure, you got your 3 starters for the rebuild, but your wild card, and this is Keldon Johnson, could he be the 6th man of the rebuild? And I think he's solidifying himself as that moving forward. And, of course, Sohan, I think the coaching staff and Mitch Johnson finally realized he's just a basketball player. That's it. He's not a 5. He's not a 3. He's not a 4. He's just a basketball player. And ever since they had the revelation, he's been playing a lot freer. He's been getting you a double-digit scoring. And, yes, being a pest on defense and getting to scraps. But this is a team that can use some physicality. They never said the S word, but they've gotten close to it. Mitch Johnson has said this team just lacks physicality. We all know what that stands for, a little bit of softness. So, so Sohan is bringing in that physicality. Castle, too, he's not a guy to back down as well. So you're starting to see these fringe players kind of really step up their game. And it definitely helps when you have a minutes to free up when you don't have Wemby and Fox, and these guys are taking advantage of it.
If you want to learn more about the San Antonio Spurs, Jeff Garcia, the place for you to go over at Locked On Spurs. Thanks so much for doing this, Jeff.
Anytime.
And for the final time this regular season, maybe we will have a date in the postseason, but the final time this regular season, Kuka Hill joining the podcast to talk about the Detroit Pistons, hosts a Locked On Pistons podcast. You can check out his Substack, Pistons Kudos, as well, where he does a great job covering the team. But since the last time we spoke, the Pistons have been really good. If we go all the way back to the month of February, Darius Garland hit a buzzer beater from the Pistons logo inside Little Caesars Arena. And after that moment, the Pistons really took off and have been playing some great basketball. What have you seen from this team over really the last month and a half, 2 months at this point, that has really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think obviously Cade's been great, and the play of your superstar, the play of your franchise player is going to be a big part of any kind of success you have. But the Pistons team defense, I think they're the best defense in the league since then, either first, second, or third around there. And the improved defensive play of Jalen Duren, the impact of Ausar Thompson on the floor defensively is otherworldly. He's just warped their defense completely when he's on the floor. So their defense has been great, and now they're number 1 in fast break points. They're around top 5 in points in the paint. They create points off turnover. I believe they're second or third in that as well. So a lot of their offense is created because their defense has been so lights out and they've been getting stops. So that's where this team is not as talented as every other team. They don't have as much talent as Boston, as Cleveland, as New York, like all these other teams. But they have a star and they have a defense that they've all bought into, and a defense that JB Bickerstaff has gotten even veterans to buy into and at least give the most effort they can give, which is translated to them being able to use what their best players are best at, which is getting out on the open floor, running, and just scoring over you, and alley-oop dunks or crazy finishes at the rim, or creating open transition threes from Malik Beasley. So I think their defense obviously is what led them to this point, and is going to get them however far they go this year.
So this isn't some crazy statement, but Cade Cunningham has been awesome this year for Detroit. I think he's on track to probably be an all-NBA player for the first time in his career. He's having a great season. And of course, you don't need to study every single thing about the Pistons to know that he's the biggest reason why they've become such a much more formidable team than they were in years previous. But what to you, I guess, has been the best thing that Cade has done this year for Detroit?
I think to say one thing, it's hard. I guess if I had to pinpoint one thing, I guess it would be his consistency and his availability. I think that has changed a lot. I mean, he's already crossed the most games played for the Pistons in any season he's had. Obviously, he missed basically the entirety of his second season. He's going to play 70-plus games this year. He's been incredibly consistent. He's been incredibly available. I mean, what he brings to the team, they're not lacking. Whether he's having a bad night shooting-wise, simply having his gravity on the floor, his playmaking ability on the floor every single night, opposed to other teams that maybe are missing their player for 25, 30-plus games. I think that's really helped the Pistons remain consistent since January, is that Cade has not missed any games, and he's been consistently who he is every single night they step on the floor. There's a bunch of things that Cade's done this year, but if you take all those things and you have that every single night for 70-plus games, that really can change your season.
So as we look at the standings, and we're recording this on Sunday, before Detroit plays New Orleans. So obviously these things can and will change, like a win or loss will change exactly how many games back there in the standings, how many games they are on the play-in. But they have a 5-game lead over the 7th place Atlanta Hawks for that final playoff spot. Like, they're not going to fall into the play-in. They are much more in a race for 4, 5, and 6. They're 2 games back of Indiana in 4th. They're a game back of Milwaukee in 5th. How important is that battle for positioning, do you think, for Detroit? Like, do they want to get up into that 4-5 to potentially avoid New York? How do you view that whole race that the Pistons are involved in right now?
I think obviously the Pistons want to win every game they go out there and play. So if they can get up to 4th seed, I mean, that would be great. That would be a great goal to achieve this year. No one thought that they would be this good. So if they were to, after having the worst season in franchise history, get home court advantage a year later in the playoffs, I mean, that would be crazy. So if they got to the 4th seed, that would be tremendous, and it would be a crazy goal that they achieved. However, I think if you're talking about having the most success possible in the playoffs, whatever success that may be for such a young and up-and-coming team like the Pistons, I think it's more about who they match up with rather than what seed they get to. I don't think they want to see Milwaukee at all. They've lost 11 straight to Milwaukee. They don't have anyone that can guard Giannis. If they get into a series against Giannis, he's going to be the best player on the floor at all times. It's not going to be a question. And the only guy that maybe could guard him is Stu, and he's going to get Stu in foul trouble very quickly. He's going to get Duren in foul trouble very quickly. You just do not – and along with that, they provide a size mismatch that the Pistons just can't answer, along with the fact that their size can also shoot, so they can also space the Pistons out while also having that size, rim protection at the rim. It's a terrible matchup. It's a reason why they've lost 11 straight to them. They don't want to play Milwaukee. That's the one team they just want to avoid. So if getting to the 4th seed means you get home court, but you're playing Milwaukee, you may go home in 5 games anyways. Like that, it doesn't change anything. If they can play, if they stay at 6 and end up playing New York at 3, I think they feel good about that matchup. I don't think they'll be favored. And would I pick them to beat New York? No. But I think the Pistons would feel good about that matchup. I think Cade specifically would feel good about that matchup. And if they got matched up against the Pacers, I think the Pistons really want the Pacers. Tony East talks about this, Locked On Pacers host. He's mentioned a few times to me that, like, this is like a one-sided rivalry. Like, the Pacers don't think about the Pistons, but the Pistons constantly talk about the Pacers. That is true. The Pistons hate the Pacers. The players hate the Pacers. Players, they want to get them out of the playoffs. They want to beat them every way possible, and they want to be the team that knocks them out. So if they can get one of those 2 teams, I think that's more important than any seeding. And with New York falling in or they haven't fell yet, but they are free falling a bit. and Indiana playing well. If Indiana gets up to the 3 and New York falls to the 4, I think maybe that could change some things as well. But overall, I think it's just about playoff matchups, not really about 4 or 5 seed.
So they are going to make the playoffs. You know, I'm with you. I don't necessarily think I would pick them to win a first round series. I don't think it's impossible. Like, I think they definitely have a chance to win a series, but they're not the team that I think would be favored. They're not the team that I would pick in any of those matchups. I do think some of them, as you mentioned, probably favor them a little bit more than others, like Milwaukee would just, I don't think, go well for them. But the fact that this team goes from 14 wins last year to where they're at this year, a team that I do think is assured of a playoff berth. I'm not sure what their magic number is, but it can't be very big. It's got to be around 8 or so. Do they need to have like any semblance of success in the postseason for this to be a successful season? Or let's just say, you know, worst case scenario, if they get swept in the first round, like, do you still view this as a successful season for Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be very hard to have anything happen from here on out that would make this not a successful season. Outside of losing every game from here on out, including the play-in, if they fell through, like, outside of that, it's hard to think of anything that could be a disappointment. And this team's over-under was 25.5 coming into the year. No one thought that they would be this good at all. No one thought that they would be a playoff team. And here they are. They've been one of the better teams in the NBA over the last 2.5 months, not just in the East. They're like 5th in total wins since January 1st. They have like a net rating of around 6th or 5th best since January 1st as well. Like, this is one of the best teams in the regular season over the last few months. So this is, it would take a lot for anything to not be a success. I guess the only thing would be if they didn't win a singular playoff game. I guess that would be like a bad taste to leave in your mouth, because a lot of the buildup, now that you knew the Pistons are good, they're going to make the playoffs. Now the next talk has been, please just get rid of that playoff win drought that goes all the way back to 2008. They have not won a playoff game since Chauncey Billups was on the team. So just win a playoff game, not a series, just win a playoff game and get that win drought completely out of there to where that's no longer hanging over the Pistons' head. They already eliminated the 14-win season drought, the little cloud hanging over them. They got that out of there. The only other one that's hanging over them right now is the fact that they don't have a playoff win since 2008. So get a win, and I don't think anything could possibly be a disappointment for this team. If they get swept in the first round, again, it wouldn't be a bad season at all. It still would be a success. It just would leave somewhat of a bad taste in your mouth.
Right. I think that's spot on. I do think that they will break that playoff drought for whatever it's worth. But Koo, thanks so much for doing this, man. Cavs looking to go 4-0 against old friend JB Bickerstaff and the Pistons when these two teams meet for the final time in the regular season this Friday. Check out Koo over at Locked On Pistons and his Substack. Pistons, kudos. Thanks so much, man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube as we get out of here, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I'll be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.